The morning sun filtered through lace curtains, painting delicate patterns on the wooden floor of a small, time-worn house. In the garden, just beyond the porch, roses bloomed with quiet resilience, crimson, ivory, and pale blush. The same roses her grandmother once tended with a devotion that made neighbors pause on their walks. Maya Johnson knelt in the soil, gloves damp with dew, pruning a stubborn stem. Her movements were deliberate, almost meditative, the rhythm of someone who sought peace in small rituals. 27. With chestnut hair pulled back loosely and eyes shadowed by solitude, she had come here not to conquer or prove anything, but simply to live. To breathe. To reclaim a fragment of her grandmother's legacy. A breeze whispered through the pines at the edge of the lot, carrying the faint hum of cicadas. For a fleeting moment, everything was still, almost sacred. Then, from across the picket fences, voices sliced into the calm. "She won't last long here," a neighbor muttered, not realizing Maya could hear. "It's Linda's neighborhood," another replied. "And Linda always gets her way." Maya stiffened, setting the clippers aside. She had already learned the name. Linda Caraway. Residents called her HOA Karen in hushed tones. Though never to her face, president of the Homeowners Association, Linda carried herself like royalty in a suburban kingdom, quick to smile in public, quicker still to issue fines and warnings behind closed doors. Maya brushed soil from her knees and rose, her gaze drifting toward the street. Linda's figure appeared in the distance, brisk and sharp, clipboard pressed to her chest as if it were a shield. She stopped to peer into someone's yard, lips pursed, then scribbled furiously. Her heels clicked against the pavement, the sound oddly martial against the sleepy backdrop of the cul-de-sac. Maya returned to her roses, but her chest tightened. She had hoped moving into her grandmother's house would mean sanctuary, a chance to rebuild after years of drifting freelance work and failed relationships. She wanted anonymity. Instead, she felt the weight of watchful eyes, rules codified into binders, and whispers that judged before truly knowing her. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The living room was crowded with relics, a grandfather clock ticking in solemn cadence, photographs of her grandmother shaking hands with townsfolk, shelves stacked with letters tied in twine. Maya traced one frame with her finger, her grandmother in that same garden, roses blooming proudly behind her. Her phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. Reminder, OA community meeting this Thursday. Attendance required. The words tightened the knot in her stomach. She had been in the neighborhood barely 2 weeks, and already she was summoned, as though she were a defendant awaiting judgment. She set the phone down and stood by the window. Across the street, Linda paused mid-stride, locking eyes with her. The woman's smile was thin, edged with something unspoken. Authority. Ownership. A promise of conflict. Maya drew the curtain, heart pounding faster than she cared to admit. For the first time since inheriting the house, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Yet when her gaze fell once more on the roses outside, she remembered her grandmother's voice, firm and unwavering. "Never let anyone strip you of your dignity, child. This home is yours. This land remembers you." The clock in the hall chimed softly, echoing like a gavel in a courtroom. Though Maya did not yet know it, the quiet war between her and Linda Caraway had already begun. The notice arrived on a Monday, tucked beneath a glossy newsletter that celebrated Community Pride Week, with photos of trimmed hedges and identical mailboxes. The envelope bore the HOA's crest in blue foil, ornate, self-important, the way a minor kingdom might stamp its decrees. Maya slid a thumb under the flap and unfolded a single page printed in small, severe type. "Notice of violation," it began. "Your fence violates HOA guidelines. Height, material, and color are non-compliant, pursuant to Section 7.2 of the Covenant. Corrective action required within 14 days. Failure to comply may result in fines and legal action." Her eyes lingered on the words, legal action, as if they were already marching up her walkway. She looked out at the fence, weathered cedar slats silvered by decades of sun, posts sunk by her grandmother's hands, crooked in places that felt more like memory than flaw. The hummingbird feeder swayed in a soft breeze. A neighbor's sprinkler clicked like a metronome. Somewhere, a dog barked twice, then went still. She read the notice again, slower. The citation referenced a covenant adopted 5 years ago, long after her grandmother's fence had settled into the earth. She flipped the page to the back. A photo was stapled there, a telephoto shot of her yard taken from the street, angled just enough to feel invasive. Her name and lot number were stamped below it. A shadow fell across the porch. "Good morning," Linda Caraway called. Already halfway up the steps, clipboard pressed to her ribs like a shield. She wore a pale suit the color of skim milk and a smile that offered no warmth. "I trust you've seen our note?" Maya folded the notice carefully, as if tenderness could blunt its edges. "I just opened it." "Excellent. Then we're on the same page." Linda glanced past Maya into the living room, taking the measure of old furniture and older books. "We have standards in this neighborhood," she said, the word standards rolling off her tongue as both rule and verdict. "Uniformity preserves value. Value preserves community. The fence was here before the HOA," Maya replied, even as a tremor ran through her voice. "My grandmother built it. It's part of the house." Linda's smile straightened into a line. "Grandfathering claims are routinely misunderstood. Regardless, the covenant is clear. Cedar of that height," she pointed with the pen, "is non-compliant. 14 days. Beyond Linda's shoulder, a man in a baseball cap slowed his jog to watch. 2 women pushing strollers paused in tandem, one whispering behind a lifted hand. Eyes traveled the length of the fence like a jury inspecting evidence. Maya nodded once, the motion automatic, her throat tight with the metallic taste of embarrassment. "I'll look into it." "Do. And remember," Linda tapped the clipboard, "failure to act escalates the matter." She turned, heels ticking decisively against the steps, already waving to the stroller brigade with a brightness reserved for allies. Inside, the house breathed cool and cedar-scented, indifferent to modern edicts. Maya set the notice on the kitchen table and opened the sideboard drawer that held a small archive of her grandmother's life. Warranty slips, folded receipts, a clutch of brittle photographs. She found a manila folder marked in firm block letters, "Property Deed and Survey." Beneath the deed, a faded city permit from 23 years ago. "Fencing residential." Approval stamp. Signature. A date that predated the HOA by almost 2 decades. Something steadied inside her. She snapped a photo of the permit with her phone and searched the HOA portal listed at the bottom of the letter. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions were downloadable. 58 pages of rules written in dense paragraphs that preferred shall over may and prohibited over 40. Discouraged. Section 7.2 addressed fences, clear enough. But Section 1.5 definitions contained a term she reread twice. Existing improvements, structures lawfully erected prior to the adoption of these covenants. She scrolled further. Existing improvements shall not be deemed violations solely by virtue of subsequent covenant enactments. Her pulse lifted, not from fear, but from the flicker of a path forward. A soft knock at the back door startled her. When she opened it, Mr. Alvarez from 2 houses down stood on the stoop, cap in hand, eyes apologetic. "I saw the letter," he said quietly. "Linda," she gets overexcited, "your grandmother was good to my wife when we moved in. If you need someone to tell the board that fence has been there since forever, I can." Gratitude warmed her face, quick and unexpected. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." He glanced toward the street. "Careful with photographs. They send people around. Snap before they knock. Makes folks nervous." His mouth tipped with a rueful smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood, I guess." When he was gone, Maya printed the covenant, highlighted Section 1.5, and clipped it to the old permit. She slid both into a clear sleeve and set them beside the notice like opposing exhibits. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked, steady as breath. From the garden, the feeder chimed softly against its hook. Her phone buzzed again, a forum link from an unknown number likely scraped from community records. Tips for dealing with HOA fines. She hesitated, then opened the thread. Stories spilled out. Retirees fined for flower colors. A veteran told to remove a flag because of bracket placement. A single mother cited for the shade of her shutters. Words like selective enforcement and retaliation surfaced, circled by anecdotes of who was nudged, who was forgiven, and who was made an example of. A low anger began to gather, not the wild kind that burned everything, but the cool, coiling kind that finds form and law. She spread the papers wider, ink-stained fingers tracing dates, definitions, exceptions. The roses outside leaned in a little, as if listening. By evening, she had drafted a calm, meticulous email addressed to the HOA compliance inbox. Acknowledgement of the notice, attachment of the city permit, citation of Section 1.5, a request for withdrawal of the violation. She read it aloud once, hearing the measured cadence she associated with a place she had tried to avoid: courtrooms, gavels, the voice of her mother at the bench. Before she clicked send, she felt the prickle of eyes. Through the blinds, Linda stood at the curb, phone angled toward the house, capturing another photo. Maya pressed send. The clock chimed again, the note resonant and exacting. Somewhere far ahead, the sound would become a gavel. For now it was only time, moving them all closer. The community center smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee, its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like impatient bees. Folding chairs filled the hall, arranged in rigid rows before a makeshift stage draped with the HOA banner. At the center of that stage sat Linda Caraway, crisp in a navy suit, pearls at her neck, clipboard resting before her like a throne's scepter. Her smile was practiced, broad enough for allies, sharp enough for dissenters. Maya slipped into a chair near the back. She clutched a slim folder against her chest, the city permit, the highlighted covenant clause, her printed email papers she had read and reread until the words blurred. Around her, neighbors murmured in clusters. A woman adjusting her scarf, a couple checking their phones, a man whispering about lawn citations. When Linda rapped the gavel against the table, the noise hushed with the instinctive obedience of a classroom. "Good evening, residents," Linda began, her voice amplified by a small, portable speaker. "We are gathered to ensure our neighborhood maintains the standards that protect everyone's property values. Tonight we'll address compliance matters, among other updates." The agenda moved briskly, repainting mailboxes, replacing light fixtures, enforcing parking rules. Each item passed with little more than nods. Then Linda's tone sharpened. And finally, the matter of Lot 23, Miss Johnson's property. Dozens of eyes swiveled. Maya straightened in her chair, pulse quickening. Linda lifted the violation notice as though it were Exhibit A in a trial. "This fence, as you can see," she gestured to a blown-up photo projected onto a portable screen, "is a clear breach of our covenant. Section 7.2 is explicit. Height, material, and color requirements are non-compliant. We cannot make exceptions for one homeowner without undermining the rules for all." A ripple of assent moved through the audience. Someone whispered, "That's the new girl." Another, "Rules are rules." Maya's throat tightened. She forced herself to stand, the folder trembling slightly in her grasp. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'd like to respond." Linda's brows arched in feigned surprise. "Of course. We encourage participation." Maya walked to the center aisle, every step echoing in her ears. "This fence was built legally, decades before the HOA existed. I have a city permit from 23 years ago. And your own covenant. Section 1.5 states that existing improvements are not violations simply because rules were enacted later." She held up the paper, the yellow highlight glowing beneath the harsh lights. For a moment, silence, then a cough, then a chuckle, short, dismissive. Linda leaned forward, voice honeyed with condescension. "Miss Johnson, while we appreciate your research, the HOA retains discretion to enforce standards for the common good. Exceptions weaken the covenant. We cannot afford slippery slopes." "But the law is clear," Maya said, firmer now. "You can't retroactively punish what was legal when built. That's not discretion. That's overreach. Murmurs stirred, hesitant, uneasy. A man in the second row frowned thoughtfully. A young mother glanced at her husband. The current ran both ways, uncertain. Linda's smile tightened. Perhaps you'd prefer to discuss this in a more formal setting, she said. The board can escalate matters if needed. The words hung heavy, a veiled threat. Maya's chest burned with the humiliation of standing alone under so many eyes, the sense of being weighed and found wanting. She wanted to fold, to sink back into her chair, to vanish. Instead, she closed the folder and held it like a shield. I just want fairness, she said. The same rules for everyone. Not selective enforcement. A hush fell. Then Linda tapped her gavel once. Final. Duly noted. The board will proceed as appropriate. The meeting adjourned, chatter resuming like bees released from a jar. Maya gathered her papers, cheeks flushed. As she turned to leave, she caught fragments of whispers. Why poke the bear? She's right, though. Linda runs this place. Always has. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the scent of cut grass and gasoline. Maya paused beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp, her heart still hammering. For a moment she considered putting the house on the market, walking away before the fight deepened. But then she thought of her grandmother's roses, of the permit stamped with lawful ink, of Mr. Alvarez's quiet offer of support. She exhaled, slow and steady. This was no longer about offense. It was about dignity. About the right to exist without being bullied by rules wielded like weapons. Above her, the courthouse clock downtown chimed the hour. She listened to its echo, low and insistent, like a gavel carried on the wind. The battle had only begun. Rain streaked the windowpanes as Maya sat at her kitchen table, the papers from last night's meeting scattered across the wood like fragments of a broken promise. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual, pressing down with the weight of humiliation. Her grandmother's clock ticked in the hall, steady, impartial, a reminder of time moving forward no matter how small she felt. She replayed the scene over and over, the dismissive laughter, Linda's patronizing tone, the way the crowd had tilted toward mockery instead of reason. Each memory seared deeper until her cheeks burned all over again. She gripped her mug, knuckles white, whispering aloud as if to the empty walls, "Why do I let her get to me?" The answer came in silence, but her grandmother's voice echoed from memory. Never let them take your dignity. A sudden knock startled her. When she opened the door, 2 HOA board members stood there, men she recognized from the meeting. One, Mr. Chambers, adjusted his tie, his expression rehearsed. The other, younger, avoided her eyes. Miss Johnson, Chambers began, clearing his throat. We're here on behalf of the board to inform you that fines will begin accruing in 7 days unless corrective action is taken on the fence. Maya's chest tightened. You're ignoring Section 1.5. She thrust the highlighted clause toward him. This fence is lawful. Your rules can't apply retroactively. Chambers sighed, as though indulging a child. The board has discretion, and Mrs. Caraway believes. That's the problem. Maya snapped, her voice rising despite herself. It isn't about law. It's about what Linda believes. She decides who gets punished and who doesn't. That's not enforcement, it's harassment. The younger man shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking to the ground. Chambers straightened, lips pressed thin. If you disagree, Miss Johnson, you may contest the violation in court. But, understand litigation is expensive. The board has resources. Do you? They left the paper notice on her step, its black print stark against the pale wood. Maya picked it up with trembling fingers. Court. The word detonated in her chest, louder than thunder. She had avoided courtrooms her whole life, determined to live in her own shadow rather than her mother's towering silhouette. But here it was summoned not by choice, but by force. That night, sleep eluded her. Shadows stretched across the ceiling, and every creak of the house sounded like an accusation. In the dark, she let the fear in. Images churned. Linda smirking in court, lawyers with polished shoes and sharper tongues, her own voice cracking as she failed to defend herself. You'll lose, the whispers of doubt said. You're not strong enough. You never were. Tears stung. Unexpected. She curled onto her side, clutching her grandmother's quilt, ashamed of the rawness inside her. She thought of leaving, selling the house, abandoning the fight, retreating before it began. No one would blame her, no one but herself. By morning, her resolve wavered like fragile glass. She brewed coffee, its bitter steam rising in the quiet kitchen. She looked again at the roses outside, battered by the storm yet standing tall, droplets clinging like jewels to each petal. Something inside her stirred small, but stubborn. The phone buzzed. A new email. HOA v. Johnson. Complaint filed. Her stomach lurched. She opened it. The scanned document scrolled down. Formal language, citations of breach, demand for injunctive relief. At the bottom, the case number. Her hands shook as she printed it. She spread the papers across the table, the notice, the deed, the permit, the covenant, and now the complaint. It looked like evidence already. Two sides of a case forming, whether she wanted it or not. She sat down, palms pressed to the cool wood, and whispered, "Enough." In that moment, the tears dried. Fear dulled into something sharper. The courtroom would no longer be just her mother's world. It was becoming hers. The courthouse summons arrived 3 days later, delivered by a uniformed deputy who seemed almost apologetic as he handed it over. The envelope was heavier than paper should be, its seal bold and unforgiving. Maya held it with both hands as though it might burn her. She laid the summons on the table beside her grandmother's clock. Its pendulum swung in steady rhythm, marking time as if counting down to something inevitable. She read the document twice, the legal phrasing dense but familiar in cadence. Plaintiff, Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Defendant, Maya Johnson. Cause of action, violation of covenant. Section 7.2. Hearing date set. Location, County Courthouse, Division 3. Asterisk, Division 3. Her mother's old courtroom. The thought made her stomach clench, though Eleanor Johnson had since been elevated to a different bench. Still, the symmetry was haunting fate's way of reminding her that no matter how far she ran, the law found her. For 2 days, Maya avoided mirrors. Every reflection showed a woman with hollow eyes, shoulders sagging beneath invisible weight. She worked late into the night, scouring the covenant, underlining clauses, cross-referencing with state statutes. She found phrases that contradicted each other, provisions so vague they could be twisted into anything. She filled a notebook with questions, counter-arguments, citations. Yet each time doubt crept in. You're not a lawyer. You'll be eaten alive. By the third night, exhaustion broke into anger. She pushed the papers aside and stared out the window at the roses. Their stems bent but did not break, jeweled with dew beneath the moonlight. She remembered her grandmother crouched in that soil, teaching her that every cutback in spring allowed new growth. Pruning looks cruel, her grandmother had said, but it's how the plant survives. The next morning, Maya stood before the mirror. Her eyes were ringed with fatigue, but behind them glimmered something steadier. She tied her hair back, squared her shoulders, and whispered a single word, "Enough." She began gathering allies quietly. At the grocery store, she approached Mr. Alvarez again, and he didn't hesitate. "I'll testify," he said. "They've harassed me about my shutters for years." A retired teacher down the block added her voice, recalling how Linda fined her for planting daisies instead of HOA-approved tulips. Slowly, a picture formed not of one fence, but of a pattern: selective enforcement, intimidation, power wielded without fairness. Her phone rang late that evening. The voice on the other end was calm, steady. "Maya, it's Mom." Eleanor Johnson's tone carried the weight of years spent commanding courtrooms. "I heard about the summons." Maya's throat tightened. "I didn't want to tell you. I thought I could handle it." "You can," her mother said. "But listen to me, truth isn't enough. You'll need to show it, document it, build it piece by piece until no one can deny it." "I don't want to use your name," Maya whispered. I need this to be mine. A pause, then a quiet strength. And it will be. I won't step into your case. But know this law isn't just for the powerful. It's for you, too. Use it. When the call ended, Maya sat in silence, staring at the growing stack of papers on her table. They no longer looked like threats. They looked like weapons evidence sharpened into blades of truth. She opened her laptop, created a new folder labeled Defense, and began organizing every scrap she had. The permit, the deed, her photos, neighbors' statements. The roses swayed outside her window, lit by a street lamp, as if nodding in approval. The summons still lay there, bold and unyielding. But for the first time, Maya didn't see it as an end. She saw it as the beginning of her fight. The morning of the hearing arrived with a thick, overcast sky, the courthouse dome half shrouded in mist, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Maya stood at the courthouse steps, fingers closed around the worn leather strap of her briefcase. Inside were carefully labeled tabs, deed, permit, covenant 1.5, witness statements. No lawyer accompanied her, no suit of armor, no legal team, just her. The air was cool, but sweat gathered at the back of her neck. The massive stone columns dwarfed her, yet she didn't flinch. Not this time. She had studied every rule, practiced every statement. She didn't need credentials to defend the truth. The hallway leading to Division 3 buzzed with voices. Linda was already there, flanked by 2 board members and a lawyer in a tailored gray suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. Linda gave Maya a tight-lipped smile, a cocktail of pity and smugness. "She's representing herself?" the lawyer muttered to Linda. "She insisted," Linda replied with mock sympathy. "Some people don't know when they're out of their depth." Maya met their eyes without blinking. She said nothing. The only sound was the click of her shoes against the marble as she stepped inside the courtroom. Division 3 hadn't changed much. High ceilings, wooden pews, the bench presiding over the room like a watchful guardian. It was strange to be on this side of it, not seated beside her mother as a child, coloring quietly during long deliberations, but as a defendant, a challenger. She sat at the defendant's table. The HOA's attorney rustled through a binder, full of confidence and copies. Maya's file looked modest by comparison, but it was exact. Her truth was sharp, focused. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Maya stood. Then the judge entered, and her world shifted. It wasn't the judge she expected. Not the older man whose name had been listed in earlier notices. This was a rule, reassignment temporary, perhaps, but fate had delivered someone else to the bench that morning, Eleanor Johnson, her mother. Maya's lungs refused to fill. She stood frozen, as if the air had crystallized. The room blurred at the edges as whispers erupted around her like brush fire. The HOA lawyer rose. "Your Honor, He scrambled for composure. "We were under the impression Judge Flanders would be presiding." "He was reassigned this morning," Eleanor said smoothly, eyes scanning the room before settling, just for a second, on her daughter. "I am presiding over all Division 3 matters today. Please proceed." Linda's face paled. She leaned toward her attorney. "This is her mother," she hissed. "We can file for recusal," the lawyer muttered. Eleanor cleared her throat, gaze sharp as glass. "If either party objects to my impartiality, state your motion now. Otherwise, I expect professionalism and respect for the court." Silence. Linda froze, weighing her options. A motion for recusal would delay the hearing. The press might sniff out nepotism or internal HOA scandal. A stall could signal fear. The lawyer swallowed hard. "We have no objections at this time, Your Honor." "Good," Eleanor said, voice even. "Let's begin." Maya sat down slowly. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear. Something deeper moved inside her, a strange mix of vulnerability and power. Her mother would not save her, but she would not harm her either. Eleanor had become the law long before Maya had become its target. "Plaintiff, you may present your opening remarks," Judge Johnson said. As the HOA's attorney stood, Maya steadied herself. The storm had arrived, not with thunder, but with truth. And now, at last, All eyes would see it. The HOA attorney buttoned his jacket with forced composure and stepped forward. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of non-compliance. Miss Johnson has violated Willow Creek HOA's established covenant, specifically Section 7.2, which governs fencing standards. Height, color, and material. He paced slowly, letting his voice project with practiced ease. The plaintiff seeks enforcement of these covenants to preserve uniformity and property value. Exceptions, Your Honor, undermine community integrity. He held up an enlarged photo of Maya's fence, already displayed in the community meeting. As you can see, this fence is clearly out of code. It's untreated cedar, over 6 feet tall in some places, and built without HOA approval. Maya watched from her seat, hands folded in her lap. The courtroom was warm despite the rain outside. She could feel eyes on her from behind neighbors, board members, perhaps curious onlookers who'd heard whispers about the twist no one saw coming. The attorney continued. We're not here to villainize Miss Johnson. But rules are rules, Your Honor. The integrity of our HOA depends on fair and equal enforcement. He turned back to his table. We will show that she was issued proper notice, given opportunity to remedy, and chose instead to defy established standards. Judge Eleanor Johnson nodded, expression unreadable. Defense, your opening? Maya rose. No podium, no team. Just her, in a simple navy blouse and black skirt, holding a manila folder lined with numbered tabs. Your Honor, she began, voice low but clear, this case may be about a fence on the surface, but beneath that it's about selective enforcement, abuse of power, and a pattern of intimidation by the HOA. She walked slowly, deliberately, toward the screen. This fence, she gestured to the image, was built by my grandmother 23 years ago, before the HOA even existed. I have here the original city permit. She held it up. Stamped and approved by the municipality. Not only that your own HOA covenant, Section 1.5 states that structures lawfully erected prior to the adoption of these covenants are considered existing improvements and are not violations. She paused. Let the words settle. Some jurors or residents rather shifted forward slightly in their seats. But more than that, she said, tone darkening, I will show that other homeowners with similar violations, fences, landscaping, even paint colors have received no fines, no notices. Why? Because they're board members, or friends of board members. She turned to face the judge and, indirectly, the entire room. This isn't about cedar or fence height. It's about control, and who gets to live in peace, and who gets made an example of. A murmur rose behind her. She sat down, heart pounding in her chest, not from fear, but from the clarity of truth finally spoken aloud. The first witness was called. The HOA compliance officer, a man in his 50s, walked stiffly to the stand. Did you issue the violation to Miss Bonnie Johnson? The attorney asked. I did. Did you confirm that her fence was out of code? I measured it. Over 6 feet in one section. And cedar material, which the covenant restricts. And did she respond? She emailed back with a city permit and referenced Section 1.5 of the covenant. And your response? I referred the matter to the board president. Which is? Mrs. Caraway. Maya's pencil moved quietly across her notepad. She underlined the words referred to the board president. On cross-examination, she stood again. Mr. Temple, have you ever issued violations for similar fences elsewhere in the community? He shifted. I can't recall offhand. I've prepared a visual exhibit, Maya said, sliding photographs onto the display, 3 homes with cedar fencing. 2 of them owned by current board members. Do these fences violate the same covenant section? Temple hesitated. Technically, yes. Were any of these homeowners cited? Please answer the question. Number. The room stirred again. Linda stiffened. Her attorney glanced sideways. Maya stepped back. No further questions. Eleanor sat straighter behind the bench. Court will recess until after lunch. We will resume with the defense's witnesses. As the gavel struck once, Linda stood abruptly, storming into the hallway with her lawyer close behind. Maya remained seated, fingers curled around her pen, exhaling quietly. It wasn't over. But for the first time, the weight of the HOA wasn't suffocating her. It was shifting, and the courtroom was listening. The courtroom reconvened with an air of tension that hadn't been there before lunch. Word had spread. The empty seats were now full neighbors, city reporters, even a young law student from the university downtown with a yellow legal pad on his knees. The shift was subtle but undeniable. People were no longer here to witness Maya's defeat. They were here to see what might come unraveled. Judge Eleanor Johnson entered with the same firm grace as before. Gavel down. Defense, you may proceed with your witnesses. Maya stood. Her voice no longer trembled. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Luis Alvarez to the stand. Luis, wearing his best flannel shirt tucked carefully into jeans, nodded respectfully as he stepped forward. He took the oath with quiet conviction and sat, hat in his lap, weathered hands folded over it. Mr. Alvarez, Maya began gently, how long have you lived in Willow Creek? 15 years, he said. Moved in when my wife and I retired. Do you recall when the HOA was formed? About 10 years ago. Linda led it from the beginning. And your home, was it subject to the covenant from the start? No, ma'am. The HOA came after. We had to vote to opt in. Did you vote yes? Number thought it was too rigid. But it passed anyway. Majority ruled. Maya nodded. Did you ever receive a violation from the HOA? Luis's lips thinned. Yeah. For having a decorative flag out past a holiday. They said it disrupted visual harmony. It was the 4th of July. Did you see other houses violating similar guidelines? He nodded slowly. Plenty. But not everyone got warned. Just the ones Linda didn't like. Did you ever speak out? Once. Told Linda it felt like bullying. Next week, I got a fine for overgrown lawn. It was mowed the day before. The room murmured. No further questions. The HOA lawyer stepped up, trying to discredit. Mr. Alvarez, you admit you didn't support the HOA from the start. Isn't it fair to say you hold a grudge? Luis smiled thinly. I hold a memory. He was dismissed. Maya called 2 more witnesses, Mrs. Brantley, a retired teacher, and Greg Simmons, a disabled veteran, each with their own stories of selective enforcement, veiled threats, and mysteriously withdrawn complaints when they agreed to stay quiet. One man even admitted to receiving a warning about a non-compliant flower bed, only to watch his neighbor, a board member, expand her stone patio without so much as a notice. By the time Maya returned to her seat, even the judge's clerk was watching with wide eyes. The HOA lawyer rose, flustered. Your Honor, we move to dismiss all witness testimony as anecdotal and irrelevant. This case concerns offense. Judge Johnson fixed him with a stare. This court determines what is relevant. The defense may continue. Maya stood once more. I'd like to submit photographic evidence of at least 7 properties with non-compliant fencing that received no violations, 3 of which are owned by HOA board members. She displayed each on the monitor, zooming in on the timestamps and locations. Same materials, same heights, different treatment. The lawyer objected. Speculation. Maya turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to admit these as rebuttal exhibits to show a pattern of enforcement rooted not in policy, but in personal bias. Judge Johnson considered, then nodded. Admitted. The air grew heavier. Linda scribbled something furiously on a notepad and passed it to her lawyer. He glanced at it, then shook his head slowly. She scowled. As Maya gathered her papers, her mother's voice rang out from the bench. Do you have anything further for the court? Maya hesitated, then walked back to the podium. One last point, Your Honor. She picked up the original city permit, the faded document signed by a now retired inspector. This was the law before the HOA existed. It is still the law. What the HOA is trying to do is rewrite the past. That's not justice. That's revisionism. She turned to face the room. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be treated the same as everyone else. No better, no worse. She paused. That fence was built by my grandmother. It's not just cedar and nails. It's memory. It's dignity. And if that isn't worth protecting under the law, then what is? She returned to her seat. Her folder was nearly empty. The courtroom, for a moment, was silent. Judge Johnson looked down, face unreadable. Closing arguments tomorrow at 10 a.m. Gavel. Adjourned. As Maya gathered her things, she passed by Linda, who finally looked at her not with smugness, but with something colder. Fear. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the courthouse windows with quiet finality. Maya stood outside Division 3, a full 20 minutes early, watching as the usual parade of faces filtered in board members in muted tones, curious neighbors, a pair of reporters with cameras hanging loosely from their necks. Linda arrived last. She wore a charcoal blazer and a string of pearls that gleamed like teeth. Her steps were brisk, chin high, expression schooled into something just shy of indifference. But Maya caught the flicker, just a flicker of unease in her eyes, when their gazes met. Inside, the courtroom buzzed low. Eleanor Johnson entered and called the court to order, her gavel sharp and unforgiving against the oak bench. "We'll begin with closing statements," she said. The HOA attorney stood, voice even but lacking the easy confidence of day one. "Your Honor, the issue before this court is not personal. It is structural. Rules are meaningless if they are not enforced. The defendant's fence does not comply with the current code. Regardless of when it was built, the board acted in the interest of preserving neighborhood standards. If we begin carving exceptions based on emotion or age, we erode the very purpose of governance." He paused, searching the room. "We sympathize with Miss Johnson, but sympathy is not a legal standard. Enforcement is." He returned to his seat without flourish. Maya rose slowly, the finality of the moment thick in her chest. She walked to the podium, folder in hand, though she didn't open it. "Your Honor," she began, "for 3 weeks I've prepared to argue every clause, every code, every inch of language inside the covenant and outside of it. I have pages of statutes, case studies, precedents." She looked down for a breath. Then she looked up. "But I realized something. This was never just about a fence." She turned toward the gallery. "This was about how power moves through a community, about how rules, when selectively applied, become tools for punishment instead of protection, about the difference between enforcement and control." Her voice grew stronger. "I've shown this court proof of legal permits, of covenant exceptions, of unequal enforcement across homes. But what I've also shown is a pattern, one where certain voices are silenced while others are shielded. That's not neighborhood preservation. That's systemic exclusion." She paused, eyes resting on Linda. "This fence wasn't a rebellion. It was a memory of a woman who built something with her own hands, who gave me a place to come home to. And that's the irony, because the HOA's slogan is protecting the value of home." She turned to face the bench. "I'm not asking the court to rewrite law. I'm asking it to uphold it. Because if you allow this kind of arbitrary enforcement to stand, then none of us are protected, just managed." She nodded once and sat down. The room was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Judge Eleanor Johnson looked out over the court with the cool precision of a woman who had spent decades slicing through performance to find truth. Her gaze passed over Linda, over the board members, over Maya, then settled on her docket. She spoke with clarity, measured and unyielding. "This court finds that the defendant's fence constitutes an existing improvement under Section 1.5 of the HOA covenant. The city permit submitted into evidence is valid and predates the covenant. The HOA's attempt to retroactively enforce new guidelines on a lawful structure is not supported by its own governing documents." Linda's face drained of color. "Furthermore," Eleanor continued, "the defense has demonstrated a troubling pattern of selective enforcement by the plaintiff. While this court will not impose sanctions, it strongly recommends a third-party audit of HOA practices." She turned to Maya. "The violation is dismissed. No fines shall be levied. This court stands adjourned." The gavel dropped. For a moment, no one moved. Then it happened. A quiet exhale rippled through the room. Maya didn't smile. She just breathed. Linda rose, spine stiff, and exited without a word. A few board members followed, whispering urgently. Others lingered, watching Maya with something new in their eyes, not pity, not curiosity, but respect. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Alvarez tipped his cap. That was one hell of a closing, miss. Johnson, Maya chuckled softly. Let's just say, I learned from the best. Later that evening, as dusk settled over Willow Creek, Maya sat on the porch beside the old cedar fence, its grain golden in the fading light. Her mother stepped onto the porch with 2 cups of tea, handing one over. You didn't need me, Eleanor said quietly. Maya smiled. Maybe not in court, but everywhere else? Always. They sipped in silence, the roses swaying gently in the breeze. Across the street, a few neighbors walked by, offering nods and cautious waves. Something had shifted. Not just in policy, in power, in presence, in peace.